All right, that's good enough. Okay, it's time for ONCC member comments. No comments? All right, we're going to number 5 now. Interim Fly Quiet weekly reports. Ryan, is that you?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Let me pull up the weekly reports for the remainder of the interim flight quiet rotation for this period. Jeanette, it looks like you've disabled screen sharing. I'm not able to.
You can try again. It's on. It's not disabled.
Okay.
I'm getting a window that says host disabled participant.
Oh, and it's
screen
together,
sharing.
Mike, so it's like,
Try it again.
okay, what am I calling
There
it
we
about?
go.
They're scheduling to get tested.
Okay.
The doctor said that she couldn't do it because it's not the one with city.
Can everyone make sure they're muted, please? This is the interim flight quiet summary reports for weeks 24 through 28. Week 28 concludes this first period of the interim flight quiet program, where we have to take a pause while we do rehabilitation work on runway 4 right, 22 left through the summer, and then we'll come back and resume mid-September for the remainder of the program. We'll have more details on the construction impacts and schedule at the full Noise Commission meeting on June 5th. So for week 24, we had some very poor utilization of the diagonal runways for weeks 24 through 28. A lot of that had to do with the unfortunate situation where we had a lot of aircraft having to be parked on the airfield due to the COVID-19 situation, and a lot of aircraft were not being used and therefore had to be parked somewhere. And we did have some aircraft parked on the north airfield that were in vicinity of the navigational aids for runway 22 right, and air traffic was not really comfortable using that runway for arrivals. So we saw very poor utilization for week 24 with the diagonal runway. You can see on the nights of April 14th through April 18th, we had almost no utilization of the rotation period. So we were really only able to use it one night, but unfortunately we also had inclement weather that night, and so that precluded use as well. Week 25 was a parallel week for departures on 9 right and arrivals on 10 left. We also had issues with the navigational aids on runway 9 right, and so we saw poor utilization for that week, where we normally see pretty high utilization for the parallel runways. As you can see, we were not able to use 2 nights on the April 20th and April 21st due to weather and navigational aid interference. Week of April 26th. Week 26 was departures 4 left, arrivals 4 right. Again, very poor utilization due to our parked aircraft in the critical areas for the navigational aids on the north airfield. Virtually no use, except for very minor use on April 26th. Week 27, back to parallels, 10 center arrivals, 10 left departures. This week we got good utilization. The only disruption was the typical nightly runway safety inspections that we do every night. So we got a good night of 10:30 p.m. start and a 6:32 a.m. stop. Again, that's a very good early start, and one of the, we typically stop at 5:45 a.m. This is went all the way to 6:32 on average for the week. And that's mainly due to the significant decrease in operations due to COVID. You can see our utilization for the week was very good. Some nights we had over 90% utilization of the rotation runways. We're primarily in east flow for the week, so we primarily used our primary configuration, arrivals 10 center and departures 10 left. And then our last week before we suspended the program was another diagonal week with departures on 4 left and arrivals on 4 right. Again, very poor utilization due to the navigational aid interference on the north airfield. We also had some nights of construction related to 4 right, 2-2 left, and 4 left, 2-2 right. Especially the construction activities in relation to the Terminal 5 expansion, which is about right here. There was some activity on those nights that required us not to be able to use that runway as well. So that completes the reports through week 28. Again, we are no longer in rotation right now. We are suspended through mid-September as we do rehabilitation work on runway 4 right, 2-2 left. And we'll have more details on that on the full commission meeting on June 5th.
Brian, can you remind us, now that we're not in rotation, as if we were actually in rotation and getting 2% actually mattered, but what are the restrictions on flights right now? Are we reverting back to fly quiet runways, or are we just saying use whatever runway you want?
No, we're back to the utilizing runways that are identified in the original or the current flight quiet program as it is today, which are runways 27 left, 9 right, 10 left, 28 right, 22 left, 4 right, and 4 left, 22 right. The 3 runways, the south north runway, are obviously closed overnight, and 10 center and 28 center is a new runway that was built after the implementation of the original flight quiet program, and it's not included. So basically it's use of those runways with the exception of 10 center, 28 center is what we're able to use. Typically though, without a specific scheduled rotation, what typically happens is we're utilizing the north runway for arrivals and 10 left, 28 right for departures.
So 10 center will not be used?
It will most likely be used. It'll have to be used because we shut down these runways for inspections every night. So when those are shut down, 10 center picks up the share of operations, and for various construction activities as well. That will be used. It doesn't preclude necessarily use of 10 center, 28 center. It's just on a more permanent basis. It's not intended to be a permanent flight quiet runway at this time under the current program.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, you have a question?
Yes, and noticing that the start time of Fly Quiet wasn't earlier than 10 p.m., it seems, in any of these weeks, despite the reduced demand.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just the time period you're counting from, or are they actually down to 1 arrival and 1 departure runway prior to that?
We look at the majority of the night, not just between 10 and 7. And so this average start times do represent when they're into that specific. It's not only 1 arrival, 1 departure, but also when they're utilizing the departure vector headings, for instance, making the turn to 290 off of 28 right, or 180 off of 22 left. So there's a couple of different factors that go into when we enter fly quiet mode. And we do look at that over the night period, not just between 10 and 7.
So they aren't precluded from starting before 10 p.m.
I wouldn't say they're precluded necessarily, but they just typically don't.
Okay, thank you.
But if there isn't any more questions,
Question.
I have a question. I have my hand raised.
who's speaking?
Is Nunzio?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want a clarification. So the flag quiet's going to be suspended until when? I didn't catch that. That I heard
So
summer.
Yes. So the interim flight quiet program, which is a temporary program, is going to be, which includes the rotation that we're looking at here, is going to be suspended through the summer till mid-September due to construction that is required with some of the runways that are included in the rotation program. So Mayor, we're going to have more detail on the timings and how the airport is going to operate during the overnight hours in the summer at the June 5th full commission meeting.
Okay, I just want to make sure I know what to tell my residents when they're telling me there's no rotation anymore. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, as of today, it's temporarily suspended due to construction activities.
Ryan had a question.
Who's that speaking?
This is Peter Bialik.
Morning, Peter.
Hi, Ryan. You mentioned interference with navigational aids. What does that mean? Can you clarify what that navigational aids thing is?
So there's navigational aids that require kind of electronics and certain line of sight. And so especially for arrivals, like an instrument approach navigational aid. When aircraft or any other physical object is in a certain distance of that equipment on the ground, it could cause interference to those navigational aids, which help pilots navigate safely to the ground in poor weather conditions. So it's kind of like electronic interference and interference with equipment that aircraft use to land safely in poor weather conditions. And because of the proximity to several large aircraft in the vicinity, air traffic decided for safety that it was better not to use that runway for arrivals.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move to 6, review of flight quiet committee decision process. Ryan?
Yep. Let me pull that up for you. Okay, so this is where we're at. Again, everyone's familiar with this slide that I show at every meeting. We are in the development and approval process for the Flight Quiet 21 alternatives that we are developing and hopefully are moving closer to putting together alternative packages that this committee can review and make some sort of determination as to what program Flight Quiet 21 should be moving forward, where then it goes to the full commission, or I'm sorry, committee recommendation. This committee votes for approval and then on to the full commission approval, where then it goes to the Department of Aviation to package up the program for FAA's full air traffic and environmental review. And then we can move into outreach and training for all the stakeholders. I showed this new slide last meeting, kind of gives a little different view of the decision process. We did make some good progress last meeting where this committee approved the continued analysis of RNAV departures for the Flight Quiet 21 program. This does not mean that specifically the alternative will include RNAV departures. It just gives us further direction to do more analysis and present you alternatives that will include RNAV departures that you can deliberate. So we're in this kind of purple phase right now where we're looking at alternatives, and we have today an alternative for you to look at, a preliminary alternative that the committee can look at and provide feedback on. These are our components. The ones outlined in red is what we've been talking about pretty heavily in all our meetings: runway configurations, what runways we're able to use arrivals for, which we recently this year got clarification from FAA on that. Talked about different schedules that we might be able to do. We talked about departure procedures as far as vector headings versus RNAV departure concepts, also the number of departure procedures off specific runways. And we still have these components that will be dedicated to future meetings: ground movement, stakeholder coordination, specifically when we get down to narrowing down an alternative. We also still have to talk about departure profiles, altitudes, and things like that, that we will dedicate meetings to in the upcoming year. So we, the last time we presented the potential runway configurations for Flight Quiet 21, and this encompasses all the runway configurations that appear to be feasible by FAA.
Ryan, have we jumped to 7?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot where.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, let me go back to the, let me just make sure there's no questions on the process where we're at.
No.
Okay. Chairman, we can move on to the
Yes.
next item.
Yes. Item 7.
So item 7 is our potential runway configurations. Like I mentioned, we presented these configurations actually last year, but we kind of we had to hit the pause button because of the North Airfield issue. We finally got resolution to that. And we also got further feedback from air traffic on the feasibility of these configurations. And so not much has changed in these configurations that you've seen before. However, we did get clarification from FAA on those configurations that require intersection departures, meaning that the departure runway, for instance, this blue box indicates this configuration requires an intersection departure. That means that the departure point is going to not be at the runway end, but a few feet ahead of that, so that ground traffic can move behind the departure aircraft when we're in this configuration. And we will, once we get into the departure procedures in depth, we'll have those exact points of where the intersection departures are, as long as lengths for each of those runways, so you get a kind of an idea of what we're talking about. But the blue boxes indicate intersection departures unless the aircraft needs full length. For instance, a large heavy aircraft may not be able to use the intersection departure and would require full length for operation necessity. JB box means a jet blast analysis is needed. So those configurations, air traffic was not quite ready to sign off on until they get more information on jet blast. Specifically, if you see in this configuration, arriving aircraft on 22 left and departing on 28 right, they're concerned about this departing aircraft interfering with this arrival aircraft when they have congruent activity. So those configurations, if the commission wants to investigate further or include in a alternative, we would have to do further investigation on jet blast. And then the VO box on any configuration represents visual only. That means those configurations, for instance, like GG, can only be used in good weather conditions because of the intercepting tracks. So the arrival runway, you can see here, kind of conjoins with the departure path. And then to avoid any issues, if this aircraft needs to abort the landing and do a go around, they are, for safety reasons, this configuration can only be used in visual conditions only. So in weather conditions that are poor, this configuration could not be used.
Dan has a question.
Yes, on the intersection departures, it's two questions. One is, I think this committee was under the impression that there wouldn't be this conflict in the north airfield. Did the FAA give some clarification as to why that is? And then specifically looking at configurations Q and P, where you have north airfield departures and they aren't qualified as intersection departures. So just trying to understand why some are and some aren't.
Yeah, good question, Dan. So we did have a meeting last week with leadership of FAA, ONCC, and CDA, where they did re-clarify that some of these configurations would require intersection departures on the north airfield. I know some of us had, you know, a similar understanding as you, Dan, that, you know, based on recent information, that possibly that would not be the issue, but it is. And as to why P and Q, I can't speak to. Those were not provided comments on that require intersection departures on the most recent feedback we got from FAA, but we'll ask for clarification on that as to if they need intersection departures, or if not, why not.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan?
Okay, so, and then just make sure everybody understands, we've grouped them into north, south, and full airfield, meaning north airfield configurations, both arrivals and departures are on the north, south airfield configurations, both arrivals and departures are on the south, and then full airfield means we're both north and south airfield with the configurations. And that's to give a little bit more detail if the committee wants to investigate an alternative where we rotate the airfields, where we would do a north airfield, south airfield, and then maybe a diagonal rotation schedule. Okay, so like I mentioned, we put together a preliminary alternative for the committee to look at and give some feedback on. We're not looking for feedback today, but we'd like to present this, have you guys kind of think about it, and then in between today's meeting and the next meeting, we'd like to schedule calls with some of you or all of you if you'd like to kind of get your feedback on this alternative so that we can keep moving forward with refining what this program might look like. So again, we're going to be showing LMAX contours, which are individual single event contours. This time we're going to be showing both a departure and arrival contour. But other than that, none of our assumptions have changed between now and what we've shown in the past. So first I'm going to go through what the initial schedule looks like. We're calling this alternative B. Once we get to the end, I'll explain why we're calling it B. But this idea is a split airfield, kind of a hybrid split airfield, where we're going to alternate between parallel west, east, north, south, and diagonals. So this is week one. It's a parallel west configuration, arriving 27 center and departing 27 left. The next week will be switched to east parallel and then south airfield, arriving 10 center, departing 10 left. And then the third week, we go to a diagonal week, departing 4 left, arriving 4 right. And then the next 3 weeks, we switch to east. So this is a similar configuration, but opposite of week one, 9 center arrivals, 9 right departures. Week 5, again, we switch from east to west, and then north again to south, arrivals 10 center, departures, 28 right. And then week 6, again, diagonals. So this is kind of a 3-week alternating between east and west, north and south, and diagonal. And this first set of 6 weeks involves one heading, departure heading. So each week, each departure runway will have a specific vector departure heading. When we're on the north airfield or the south airfield, those departure headings will stay to the north or stay to the south, so that in weeks, for instance, weeks one, the south airfield communities should see some significant relief because majority of aircraft will stay to the north. And week 2, north airfield communities should see some significant relief because all the activity will remain to the south. Then the next 6 weeks, the configurations repeat. However, we're using a second departure heading. And so weeks 7, 8, 9, again, are similar to weeks 1, 2, and 3, but the departure headings, the 3 departure headings, are different departure headings than weeks 1, 2, and 3. And then we, again, weeks 10, 11, and 12 do the same thing with 3 different departure headings. So it ends up being a 12-week rotation schedule involving 8 parallel weeks and 4 diagonal weeks. And then we can look at what that looks like kind of in summary. You can see 12 weeks. It's a 12-week rotation. I'm calling it a hybrid split airfield because we are using the diagonals 4 weeks that we can't really split the airfield because of those diagonals and intersecting runways. These are, all the headings are vector heading only, so we're not showing any RNAV departure headings. We have 2 departure headings per each configuration. Again, 8 parallel weeks and 4 diagonal weeks. So we have the number of weeks, the configuration, which airfield each week is operating, the flow of each week, departure runway, and departure heading. So here's week 1. We have our arrival runway 27 center with the arrival LMAX contour and departure heading 27 left to 280 degrees. So again, majority of operations stay on the north airfield. This is a parallel west flow configuration. Week 2, we switch to the south airfield and an east flow configuration with departures on 10 left with a vector heading to 100 degrees and arrivals on 10 center. And then week 3, we enter a diagonal week with departures straight out on 39 degrees and arrivals on 4 right. And then we switch into a similar configurations, but we operate on a different flow for the primary configuration. So week 4 is similar to week 1, but we are using 9 center for arrivals and 9 right for departures with a 080 degree vector heading. Week 5, we flip to west flow, south airfield, 28 center arrivals, 28 right departures, 260 degree heading, keeping the traffic as much as we can to the south airfield. And then back to diagonal, where we do a straight in approach for runway 22 right, but this time we do a 180 degree to the south for 22 left. And again, this is a vector heading procedure, not an RNAV procedure. Week 7, back to 27 left departures like we did in week 1, but this time we are using 295 degree headings, so a turn more to the north. 27 center, again, straight in approach. Week 8, we now flip to south airfield east flow configuration, 10 center arrival, 10 left departure with a further turn to the south at 115 degrees. Week 9, diagonals, 4 left departures. Again, this is, instead of the straight out departure, this is a 014 degree heading more to the north not RNAV vector heading departure, and then the arrival on 4 right. Week 10, back to parallel north airfield, 9 center arrival, and a 9 right departure further to the north at 065 degrees. Week 11, back to south airfield, west flow, 28 center arrivals, 28 right departures, further turn to the south at 245 degrees. And then finally on week 12, back to diagonals, where we do a straight out departure on 22 left at 222 degrees and arrival on 22 right.
Ron, you have a question? Ron?
Yeah, as you're going through these, Ryan, I'm trying to figure out how it would be handled when an aircraft needs longer than the runways allow for when they're on diagonals. How would that be handled? Because that's not identified.
Yeah, so that's something we'll look at a future meeting. There is a question put to the FAA right now regarding long runways and what runways may be used for a quote unquote long runway. So that's still a variable we're looking at because we're not sure if it only has to be 10 left, 28 right, or if in future conditions we can utilize one of the north airfield runways. But yes, there will be another runway required to set, especially when we're in diagonal weeks, when aircraft that require longer runways won't be able to use these 2 runways. But which runway that is, we're still working on with air traffic, and we still also have to talk to our airline partners to see what they're comfortable with as well. So right now we're not identifying a 3rd runway, but that's not something, again, this is a preliminary alternative. This isn't the full package yet. This is just something to get us started and continuing talking about, but that will be something that may or may not be identified as we move forward.
Okay,
Does
thanks.
that answer? Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Evan here. Just to pick on
Yeah.
Ron's thing. First off, the very good presentation. I appreciate it. I do think that it is critical we get that rotation of a long runway and diagonal to move forward, just because we know what happens when we get 2% on the diagonals. We need to make sure there's still relief provided. It's not just put on 10 left and 10C.
Yes, I agree. And yeah, we're continuing to talk to FAA, make sure we get their feedback on from their perspective, and also the CDA will move forward with talking with the airline partners as well to make sure we're considering their needs. So this slide 25 here is the full.
Brian, we got one more
Yes,
question
sir.
at the end.
Okay.
And just to piggyback on Evan, this is where the issue of the full-length runway departures is particularly a problem. If we don't have full-length availability in that north airfield, the alternate runway being in the north airfield is greatly diminished. So I would encourage the committee to keep pushing the FAA for giving us more opportunity for full-length departures.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. And what I will say during daytime hours, you know, we do intersection departures all day long, except when there's an aircraft that needs full length. If an aircraft needs full length, they'll use the full length. So it may not, the default may be intersection departures, but for operational needs, they will still allow full length departures for those aircraft that may need it in daytime configurations.
Okay,
Why doesn't CDA consider land acquisition on the north side like they did on the south side?
I cannot answer that.
That was a smug comment. I apologize.
we have 2 more people that have questions, and then what I would like to do is have Ryan finish his presentation, then we can just spend all the time we want on questions, okay? Mayor Nunzio?
Yeah, I'll just quick question. So I know some of these numbers are skewed because these airlines have all these aircrafts parked. Do you guys have any idea how much longer that's going to be like that? I hear the flights have been increasing, but I don't know, probably not enough, right?
Yeah, Mayor, we, at the tech committee meeting, I presented a kind of an outlook of, as best as we can right now, as how COVID-19 has impacted the operations at the airport and nationwide, and also, you know, kind of what we're thinking, at least in the near term. This will be, you know, an impact that will affect the operations at O'Hare for some time. How long that will be, I can't say, but there are increases in operations. Each day we're kind of inching a little bit more and more, but it's still well below where we were at, you know, at this time period last year. So I can't say it's not going to be, you know, next month where we're back to 2,500 operations a day at O'Hare. When that will be really is, you know, once, you know, people that travel feel safe and comfortable doing so by air. And I can't really speak to when that might be.
Right.
Okay, Cynthia?
On the issue of intersection departures on that north airfield, Ryan, would it be possible maybe to identify what amount of runway would be available? Because I think the term may be being interpreted as being more restrictive than maybe it is, because I think, you know, if there's still 11,000 feet left or 10,500 feet, that's still a great length of runway for a good number of the fleet mix. You might have, you know, a handful of aircraft that want more distance than that. The other issue that could help, you know, is implement a hold short in those diagonal weeks to utilize those northern runways, and allow as much runway as possible for the fewer aircraft that might need it. And then we would endorse this hybrid concept and the way you are rotating around the airfield, because it appears, well, it doesn't appear to, but in our opinion gives significant relief to those communities that are in the off weeks, not assigned either on the north or the south. It just appears, you know, it's maximizing the quiet between the north and the south, and as much east to west as possible as winds will allow.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, I had mentioned earlier that we are going to be dedicating as a main component of possibly even the next meeting. Still need to talk to Evan and company as to what we want to talk about next, but our idea is to dedicate a major component of the next meeting to specifically intersection departures, what those look like, how much distance each runway has when we're using intersection departures. So let me talk about this slide, and then we can proceed with further questions you may have. This is kind of an overall summary of alternative B, where we have all the contours overlaid on each other, the schedule of rotation configurations. And looking at this, what you can see on this alternative, some things that you may or may not you know, be comfortable with. One being, you can see, as some have noted previously, when we are departing and arriving a runway, whether the departure heading is straight out on the arrival runway, we have some overlap there. So a next iteration of this alternative, maybe if we get a lot of feedback saying, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense, maybe we should do either a different heading or only one departure heading off of the diagonals to avoid this kind of overlap that we see, similar to the other runway configurations. And again, this is just initial alternative, preliminary 12-week rotation, again, vector headings only, and the 2 departure headings per each runway, but each variable here is flexible, and we can do something slightly different for a different alternative to consider. But we think at least the overall concept is based on the feedback we've gotten to date. It represents what this committee is looking towards. And so if we plug in what this looks like in our, based on what criteria the commission has, or this committee has decided upon. Alternative A, we're keeping as what we have today. So this is our do nothing alternative. And if the committee decides we can't come up with a new alternative, this is what we'll be doing moving forward, unless there is something new implemented. So you can see the existing Fly Quiet as it is today. It's kind of a broken program, and it doesn't meet the majority of the criteria this committee has set. Alternative B, which is the one I just showed you, we are able to meet quite a bit of the criteria. However, intersection departures, this criteria of utilized full length, we've color coded yellow because based on the information we have, we're not able to do that all the time. So it's kind of, it's not green, it's not red, it's kind of a maybe depending on the situation. And so as we move forward, we can, and we develop more alternatives, we can kind of plug this into this matrix so you can kind of get a sense of what each one looks like and how it meets the criteria that you have established.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. We have a couple of questions. Alderman Dunn?
Yes, thanks. I just want to point out, Ryan, good job on putting together this initial draft proposal. It looks like it has a good balance, good balanced approach. How did you come up with, on the departures, the parallel departures seem to be all the same spacing between them, maybe 20 degrees or so, and then the diagonals a little more, maybe 40. Are they, how'd you come up with the spacing between them? And then did you consider least population impact or compatible land use? How'd you come up with those?
So great question. In regards to the diagonals, the vector heading that does not utilize straight out was meant to be close as to what we are kind of looking at as far as compatible land use in regards to the interstate and what we have today. So this, both of these kind of mimic, especially to left, the current vector heading procedure that makes that turn to the south to try and keep the traffic over 294 as much as possible. As far as the parallels, we did not specifically look at compatible land use specifically in these. These are only based on heading degrees and will probably most likely need to be refined as we look at population impacts moving forward. Once the general idea or concept of an alternative is appealing and moving forward to the next step, we will look at impacts and more specific noise impacts through our modeling process. And we can tweak each of those contours as best we can. But the problem really with the parallel runways is there really isn't a great compatible land use area. Of course, we have the industrial area in Elk Grove Village. But other than that, those were just even degree heading separations on the parallels to provide a bit of dispersion week to week. But again, each one of these can be modified. The degree headings are really just kind of a starting point that we're looking at. And if this is something that we want to move forward on, we can tweak each one of those as best we can, and especially when we look at impacts in our model, to see what might be the best, the most ideal degree heading off of each runway.
All right, thank you. Ernie? Ernie, you there?
Yeah, I'm good, Joe. I had my question answered during the other discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question, Joe.
Okay. Dan?
When we keep referring to compatible land use and impacts on population, were those ever a criteria stipulated for this process?
Avoid consecutive impacts is one of the criteria. But again, I guess specifically outlining, compatible land use is not a specific criteria, but the overall idea of a flight quiet program is to limit the amount of noise impact as best as we can. So that's kind of a given, right? And whether or not we attempt to specifically pick headings that we try to miss as much people as we can, that's something that is going to be really difficult with the geographic location of O'Hare and completely surrounded by communities. So it's kind of as best we can. And again, this committee has also, I wouldn't say has fully decided on whether dispersion of departure traffic or precise RNAV departure traffic is really what they want. It's something that this committee is still considering.
And I think it's important to prioritize those because there's certainly some situations where trying to use compatible land use would conflict with consecutive impacts. So
I agree.
It's hard to know the starting point unless we know what the priority is, particularly for departures.
Okay. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to thank Ryan. You did a heck of a job.
Joe, I think Ron Seymour has his hand raised. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ron?
That's all right. Just a quick question. I'm just curious. So will these slides be sent to the committee members, or will we need to go to the website to download it and then comment on it?
I'll send this to Jeanette today, and she can distribute it to all the committee members today, as well as put it on the website.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Good to hear.
And then, Chairman, I'd like to just reiterate that, we are looking for this committee's feedback on this alternative, as well as the runway configurations that I showed earlier. And we can, between now and the next couple of meetings, we can develop new revised alternatives or, a revision on this specific alternative. But we'd like everyone to kind of work with Jeanette as much as possible to schedule time between now and the next June meeting to kind of a quick call to get your thoughts on what you saw today so that we have additional direction on what to develop moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, Cynthia, you have a question? Cynthia?
Sorry, I was on mute. So along the lines of compatible land use, Ryan, is it possible for us to look at sound insulated homes as well? Because we do have concerns with the overlap, but we also would like to be fair that to those that aren't sound insulated, to recognize that the sound insulation is supposed to bring interior noise levels down to 45 dB, which is not the case for those that are not sound insulated. And, we feel that that's just another factor, both to consider in fairness, but also to consider CDA's and the FAA's investment to insulate those homes was significant.
Yeah, I'll present that to CDA and Evan and Joe and Karen and see what their thoughts are.
All right. Jeanette, are there any more questions? No? All right, we'll be moving to number 8. The next ONCC Fly Quiet Committee meeting will be June 23rd, 2020, located either here or at a real site at 9:30. We have comments from the audience.
Joe, I
And-
believe Dr. Tranny has a question.
Oh, I thought that was taken care of. I'm sorry. Dr. Triani, yes.
It's just a comment. I guess the question is, CDA, are you guys going to modify the departure contours to reflect a more realistic fleet mix at O'Hare? Or are you going to continue using just the 737? It seems to me that if you end up using that and you portray those contours to the community, you are in fact reducing the size of the LA Max impact at the threshold level that you decided to impose.
Oh yeah, Dr. Tranny, we're just using LMAX right now as kind of a way to simply kind of look at these alternatives. But yes, we will be doing a much more robust noise contour analysis once we refine which alternatives might be worth moving forward with. But we need to get some direction and decisions made on some certain variables before we do that.
Right, and again, we will be happy to provide. I think we have provided 3 recommendations to CDA about the possible changes that you may want to consider, including hybrid fleet mix in the depiction of the contours, as well as the kinematic envelopes, of where the contours actually start. I mean, when the vehicles actually turn. So, but anyway, we can talk about it offline. Thank you.
Okay. If I could just ask the committee for some help. If you have a question, it might be easier if you tell Jeanette and I through the chat section that you have a question so that I don't miss you, or because I don't see everybody and it's hard to tell who wants to ask a question, who doesn't. So if you could just let me know if you do have a question while we're talking about a discussion item, to let Jeanette and I know so that you'll be recognized. I'd appreciate it. Now we're to comments from the audience. Susan Carbon. Suzanne?
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself. My mouse didn't want to work. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. My question, Ryan, first off, good presentation. We had talked about at the last, or you guys had talked about at the last meeting about being open to evaluating RNAV. My question is, as that's being evaluated, when will the headings that you determine that you want to try, when will those be tried? And will a population be played into the dispersion model? Because I know with 27C where I'm over, when you do the more finite numbers, you're going to hit a more intense, smaller condensed group of population. So I'm wondering, when you do the vector, or excuse me, when you do the RNAV headings, are population going to be considered? And so you're doing right now the vectors for the next 12 weeks. When do you think you're going to start to try RNAV, or is it still in the conversation stage? It's a common question.
So the RNAV is still in the development stage. We're still working with FAA on the specific procedures and what is feasible. But if I'm understanding your question, we are only going to be trying it in the sense of presenting it to the committee as far as including in an alternative. Once an alternative has RNAV departures as part of the program, we will do further noise modeling for you to look at, but the actual full analysis will be done as part of the FAA's environmental review, which will take place over some time. So an actual, we won't be, I guess, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we won't be testing RNAV in reality. It will not be implemented until this committee decides and the full commission decides it's something they want in an alternative, and the FAA goes through the environmental approval process. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
It does. I guess my concern is, you know, a model and the actual reality. I'm concerned, you know, what looks good in a model or what they may assume in a model may not be the actual.
Yeah,
So,
I understand, and unfortunately, under the restrictions that we have, that is the best we can do. We can't start testing in reality different air traffic procedures without doing a full environmental review.
Do we have another question from the audience? I don't have a name. Somebody have a question from the audience?
Joe, Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Frank here from 41st Ward. How are you?
Fine.
It seems, I don't want to sound like a broken record, so I won't, but it seems like COVID has done what our committee and the whole ONCC apparatus was not able to do, and it's lowered nighttime noise. Ryan has presented his case, and it's very compelling. We're down to 50 overnight flights, approximately, and they stay within the official 10 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning time, which was the target for the Fly Quiet. So that leaves about 50 flights approximately that were probably causing that time to be compressed down from 9 hours to about 6 hours. So I would like the committee to ask the CDA to approach those carriers that are in that 50 flights and work with them to try to get them to move. When this COVID thing goes away and the nighttime flights go back up to approximately 100 a night, if we can move those 45 to 50 flights that are causing us to compact the fly time quiet from 9 hours down to 6 hours, if we could get those airlines or carriers to voluntarily go forward or backwards in time a little bit, I think that would do more to provide a good night's sleep for the whole airport community. It would do more than all of these fly quiet modes and runway rotations and everything put together. I think we can all agree and admit that the past 2 months have been very quiet at night. People are commenting that they're actually getting some sleep. So if we can get the committee to approach CDA and just ask them, please work with the airlines to try to get them to move their flights forward and backward to provide a full 9 hours of something like Fly Quiet. Thank you.
Frank will look into it. Thanks.
Chairman, I'd like to clarify one thing, and I appreciate Frank giving me credit, but this is alternative B is not Ryan's alternative. It is an alternative that is based on the feedback that we've gotten so far from the committee as well as from FAA and air traffic. So this is just an alternative that represents the direction that this committee is going at this time. It is not my preferred alternative or what I, am promoting or supporting. It's just an alternative.
I totally understand that, Ryan, and thank you, but it wasn't your option B that convinced me. It was the weekly reports that convinced me. And those are factual. They're not anyone's opinion. It's facts. So if we look at the facts, the nighttime flights are down to 50 from approximately 100. And the time, the Fly Quiet time, has actually gone to the 10 o'clock in the evening to 7 o'clock in the morning target that we have been trying to reach. That's all I was saying.
Thank you, Frank. Any other questions? If not, though, I hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All right, very good. This meeting's adjourned, right? Oh, I forgot to ask. Does anybody disagree with adjourning this meeting? Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Our next meeting is June?
June 23rd.
June 23rd.
Yes.
See you June 23rd. Thank you.
Thank you.